Welcome to my video. Here you'll see a power of bishop pair in an endgame, and also you'll see a battle between a good king versus bad king. In this position, white played queen d2. And can you tell me if this is a good or bad move? You can pause the video here if you wish to answer this question. Actually, this is a bad move because of the following sequence. Takes, takes, and bishop c5 check. And now the king has to go back to h1, which is a very bad square for the king. And now you can see that it's very tough to activate this king. These two bishops are doing a good job of defending against activation of this king by king g1, king f2. And it's not easy now for white to get his king into the play. Here white just tries to make use of his extra pawn on the king side by pushing e5, while on the other side you can notice that it's not easy to push these pawns, because the bishops control most of the squares on the queen side. Also take a look at this matchup. Bishop on c4 against this knight on c1. The knight on c1 is completely disabled, and the only piece that can make this knight go from c1 is maybe the pawn, which might get to b3, or the king, but white's king cannot get to c2 anytime soon because of the bishop on c5 mostly. In this position, white played g3, but it's not the best move. How do you make this knight go from c1 to any square? You can pause the video here, and the answer is by b3. White can play b3, and when the bishop goes to f1 to keep an eye on d3 and e2, now white can go knight a2. And now if black captures on a3, it's a bit tricky now, because the king activates, and after bishop d3 there is knight b4. And I think this endgame should be a draw. If black takes on b4, takes, even if he loses the b3 pawn, it's not a big deal, because black can simply hold the queen side by bishop e3, bishop b6, and I think this is some kind of fortress. So actually being greedy here after knight a2 is not the best option. The best is probably to go f5 and to slowly enter with the king. For example, if black does the same, knight b4, black can push, and after knight c6 and a4, and now there is no time to do something like this and take on e5, because after capturing this pawn will be very dangerous. So maybe here the best chance is to go for b4, but after bishop d6, protecting the pawn, this pawn majority is disabled. On the queen side, the king will enter with king f7, king e6. At some point, black will push his passed pawn. Here, white played g3 as I told before. Can you find the best move for black in this position? The best move is a5. The point of this move is to completely fix the queenside structure by a4, which will forever disable b3 from being played. If white tries to go for b3, now there is a nice way to exploit this. You can pause the video and try to find the best move here. After b3, a3 is under attack, so black has to make one more threat before white is able to defend this pawn. So black can play bishop d5 here, threatening against f3 pawn, and in case of king g2 defending this, we can take on a3 and black is a pawn up. And of course, if you go b4, you don't take on b4, you just pass with a4, and bishop b2 is gonna come next with a3, a2, and that's it. Also, after a5, if the king goes to g2 trying to activate, now as I told, a4, executing this idea, and you can see that the knight on c1 is completely stuck on c1, there's no help from the king. If he tries to go f4, trying to get king f3, knight e2, potentially, black can just ignore this and pass with e4. And after bishop e1, let's say, to go bishop f2, you can just enter with bishop e3 and take the knight. Also here, if you try maybe something like g4 to activate via f5, king g3, There is a good way to stop that by f5, a nice prophylaxis, and in case of gf, then to enter with the king and slowly pick up this pawn. Let's say if you try king g3, king f6, and something like king g4, I think you can even go for h5, and in case of this, to just pick up the pawn, and once you push e3, the f4 pawn is gonna drop. Very soon white will be forced to give up a piece. And also at the moment white is in some kind of mating net, because black can play bishop e7, bishop f7 and give a checkmate. And also if you go back to h4, well, there is bishop to f2, and in case of this, bishop f7. Or if king h3, bishop f1, checkmate. With the knight on c1 being so paralyzed, it feels like white is playing with a piece down. And also when you include the more active king, it's a disaster for white. So a5 was a very good move here. Here b4 didn't promise too much because black can just take, and after this bishop b6 with the same f5 and king activation with king f7, king e6. For example, king g2, you can go f5, and when the king goes to d5, black will be able to push, and the king is still not able to enter e3, e2 to make the knight work. So basically this pawn is gonna decide, and also with the king being so active, it's not possible to hold this as white. Bishop f1 was played in the game instead. So here white gets some chance because knight is now free to go. Knight b3 is coming, bishop f2, and now knight a5. The knight doesn't have a particular destination, but at least it's free for now. Black just tries to involve his king in the play by f6, and now knight to b7. King f7, check, here, knight e4, and the bishop goes back. Still, this is a very, very good position for black because the white's king is still pretty bad. White tries with bishop e1 and now king d5. With bishop e1, white was trying to exchange bishops by bishop f2, but the king got very, very active in the meanwhile, and now bishop f2 would not be such a good decision because after capturing king c4, the king goes to b3 and captures on b2, which means that it's game over. White tries to make a fortress. At least now the knight on d2 is much better than on c1, but still quite passive. Now bishop h3 by black, and now b3. As you see, the king is still paralyzed, it cannot move at all, and white will slowly run out of moves. He will slowly get into some zugzwang, and black played bishop e3. Just a very simple waiting move, which makes white to make a very bad move. In case of c4, let's say, you can just go king d4, and after this and a4, what do you think black should do here? You can pause the video here if you want. The easiest way possible to win this is to play king d3, to attack the knight, and if the knight moves, let's say, to e4, then you don't bother capturing on a4. Now there's a nice move like king e2 with king f1 and bishop g2 in the end, and white cannot stop this. So after bishop e3, here white resigned because the moves were gonna expire, and also the thing that doesn't work in white's favor is that black also has a potential passed pawn in the center, and with the king being so inactive, it's not possible to maintain this position. And that's it. You saw how things turned wrong with the queen exchange. The reason why the queen exchange didn't work in this particular case is that after queen d2, bishop c5, the king got too passive. And the second reason is this knight. If the knight was slightly better, For example, if the pawn from c3 is moved back to c2, then it's a different story. The knight can jump to d3 and the pieces are more harmonious. But in this way, the knight was very bad and it forced some weaknesses like b3 and it wasn't ideal for white. Yeah, the third reason is this structure, which is connected to the second reason, because if the pawn was on c2, it wouldn't be so easy to fix the structure on the queen side by a5, a4, like Black did in the game. Combining all this, combining the bad king versus good king, bad king, good king. This bishop pair which disabled the king to be active, a bad knight against good bishop. White could not expect a good result from this after combining all these elements. It's a shame that Black didn't play a move like a5 here to fix with a4. But even without that move, it feels like Black was in control the whole game. I hope you found this video very instructive and I'll see you soon with more content. Take care and bye.